I've read hundreds of books over the course of my life, some of them quite thick, and for a long time, I thought that the most important question was, how much of what I read can I remember? But I gradually learned that that's the wrong question, because reading isn't the goal. Reading is just part of a process. Memorizing isn't the goal either. The better question is, what am I trying to do with what I'm learning? And that one question changes what you read, what you take notes on, what you deliberately memorize, and then what you become perfectly happy to forget. At least that's what I hope you'll come to understand, because that's the way I do things. And here are 5 principles you can use when deciding what is actually worth remembering from a book. So number 1 is know what the knowledge is for. Before you're trying to remember something, ask what you want the knowledge to help you do. Now, maybe you're preparing for an exam, or maybe you're writing a book. Maybe you're learning a professional skill, or maybe you want to teach the material, solve a problem, or simply understand the subject more deeply. The purpose changes what deserves your attention. Now, I know that some of this seems captain obvious, but a lot of people don't really have that in mind, and it's something I get in my inbox. I don't have a goal. I don't have a foundational principle. Why not sit down and get one? I experienced this very clearly during law school from the examination setting, the study setting, and the learning outcomes and assessment criteria were available. So rather than wondering, what do I read from this massive textbook? And rather than behaving as if I needed to know absolutely everything in the book, I worked backwards from what was actually being assessed. I still read widely outside of the assessment, but the goal helped me decide what deserved the most attention. Now, I was a professor for many years, and many students just wouldn't read the criteria, and that affected their grade. Now, if you read that criteria, you're going to just get better results because you're reading towards the goal. Now, is this a little bit tedious? Can it be boring sometimes? I would say not really. If you keep the image of success in your mind, read towards having that success later. It's called delayed gratification, and it works. Now, in terms of my own research, or maybe if you're doing research for a project or a book you want to write or whatever it is you want to do, you want to do the same thing. Even if you don't know where you're going, and there will be surprises along the way, make sure you know which direction you're heading anyway. Have a hypothesis. Have a question. So, for example, right now I'm reading about Toscanini, and I heard that he had an extraordinary memory. And, I'm interested in all kinds of things about his life, but I want to make sure that as I'm reading about memory. And I'm also keeping my eyes peeled for lessons about learning at large, but specifically memory. So my goal determines what I'm going to take most from this book. So the larger purpose you have will change and condition what you notice. And you don't have to ask, how will I remember this entire book? Just ask, what is this knowledge for? And then hunt for it in the materials that you need to read. Now, the second thing is absolutely don't try to remember every single thing that you read. I don't try to remember everything that I read, and I don't think anybody should. Trying to preserve every idea can actually distract you from understanding what matters. A book is not a container that needs to be copied into your brain, and your notes are not another book that you have to copy the original book into. And there are techniques out there like the Memory Palace, and people think about it as some sort of warehouse or storeroom where every sentence can be given permanent storage. That's absolutely not true. Now, yes, some ideas are central. Yes, there are ways to memorize certain passages verbatim. And yes, you can even remember entire books, and it's been done, but who's going to listen to you recite the whole book? What you want to do is think about what are the ideas that can remain in the book until you need them again. And if you're not going to memorize key points, you can start by extracting points onto index cards. And there's a problem. A lot of people want to know beforehand what it is they need, but you cannot know in advance with any kind of precision what's going to matter. So you take notes based on what you think will be interesting in the moment and let go of the outcome that it will be perfect. Read widely, stay curious, use memory techniques for sure, but remember information selectively. You'll get a lot more mileage in the end. And you'll ultimately probably remember more because less is more, and it allows your brain to just make connections through processes like diffuse thinking. Now, the third thing is you want to think about remembering ideas that you can use repeatedly. So ask, what deserves deliberate memorization because I'm going to use it? So, I always repeat this thing, like, why would you memorize an entire book? Who's going to listen to you recite it? Rather think, like, what is something that I might be expected to be able to draw upon again and again? It might be a principle or a framework or a specific definition or a quote, and it might be a story. And that essentially is a sequence, and a lot of stories have concepts embedded in them, which allow you to better understand other concepts. The point is to find something that sits in the center of your profession or your studies or a project that you care about, and then memorize the things that you're going to use so that you can get use out of them. Because knowledge that's available in your mind, it's able to participate in helping you produce new thoughts, compare ideas, notice contradictions, think deeply and critically, make connections. You can recognize when a new problem resembles an old one, and that's where memory techniques become incredibly useful, because you're not trying to win a contest for how much information you can store, but you are building pattern recognition and you're making important knowledge available when you actually need it. And often you have greater dexterity so that you actually can produce the knowledge in different ways rather than always exactly the same. So I've memorized a lot of things verbatim, and I don't always recite them verbatim. I sometimes just summarize the things that I've memorized because I can switch on a dime thanks to having memorized them, but I still memorize them in the first place because I wanted to put them into use. The fourth thing is knowledge needs room to move. So teaching as I do, often in the Magnetic Memory Method world with boot camps and all kinds of live events that we have, it just reminds me of this constantly. If I explain something to a student and they don't understand it, repeating exactly the same words louder isn't going to help. I need another explanation, another example, analogy, maybe another angle entirely. And that ability to manipulate and redeploy an idea is one of the best tests I know of whether you actually understand it. So when you finish reading something important, and one of the best ways to understand is to write about it from memory, teach it to somebody else, use the information to solve a problem, even if it's an imaginary problem in an imaginary world. And maybe you are going to go out and build something new. Knowledge becomes so much more powerful when it leaves the page and starts doing work in the world. So always look for opportunities to apply what you're reading. And that can be a little bit mysterious. How am I going to do this? But try to get started. I'm a teacher, and when I memorize various stories about like Diogenes and Alexander the Great, I look for opportunities to put them into action. And that's why I memorize them in the first place. And then actually, when I talk about them, I'm able to observe them and figure out new ways to make them useful, and then change how I teach, produce new kinds of teaching just from the concept. So fifth, I don't believe everything has to live inside your head. I use memory palaces and other mnemonic techniques strategically, but usually only after taking notes strategically. And I put time into writing summaries. I write out lots of things by hand, and I talk a lot about learning with other people, and I go the extra mile to research beyond the call of duty. Even if I've memorized key points from certain books, I also revisit those books to expand upon what I've read when I'm able to. There are times when I've just used my little index cards and carried them around the world because I've been to libraries that I'm never going to see again, or at least I don't think I will. But, these learning approaches and these systems, they need to work in combination. They don't compete with one another. They support one another. And I think what a lot of people do is they try to put everything on one technique, but there are multiple techniques to use. So I think a main problem that a lot of learners have is they try to make one technique do all the work, when really it's a combination of techniques that are going to help you preserve ideas and make useful connections in your head in a way that doesn't really require as much memorization as you might think. And then the writing reveals gaps in your understanding. Having conversations can reveal that you don't understand certain ideas nearly as well as you thought, but you never would have noticed if you didn't struggle to get it out of your mouth. So you want to put things into practice so that something that you've learned, you realize, this is not working out the way that I expected. And that's learning. So after reading hundreds of books, I no longer worry very much about how much of each book I can reproduce from memory. I ask a different question. I believe it's the most important question in the world. What am I trying to do with what I'm learning? This helps all of us decide what deserves attention and what deserves memorization and embedding in a larger process of learning, taking notes, talking to other people. And then you know what you can safely let go as you continue to read wider and wider. And you select more and more selectively, always testing what you recall, always using what you learn. And you're going to find that you get a much better result, especially when you take it to the next step to solve problems and to build things. That's putting knowledge to work, because the real value of reading isn't measured by how much of a book you can reproduce from your memory. It's measured by what becomes possible because you engaged deeply enough to expand your perspective, grow your skills, and do something cool in this world, ideally something that helps others. So once you've decided that something is really worth remembering, how do you actually get it into memory? Well, that's exactly what I show you in the Memory Palace technique for studying. I take you step by step through using this ancient technique to memorize only the most specifically useful material from a textbook. Watch that video next. Hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you want more discussions and suggestions like these. Check the description for a special live learning opportunity I have coming up. And enjoy my video, The Memory Palace Technique for Studying, next.